We are back with another episode of Boots, Balls and Bras for the final episode of the season with myself, Fara Williams, and the amazing Anita Asante. Neat, was you across any of the final games of the season or too busy for that?
Unfortunately, I was working Fara on the weekend on another programme, but yeah, I obviously saw, watched it back and saw the results. So, yeah, I mean, an exciting end with lots of goals as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an exciting end. I mean, you think back to Christmas when we was, deciding who could go down. That got decided a few weeks back, but the teams that were in at the bottom that have then ended up a little bit higher, and we'll talk about the league position in a little while. But the question was, going into the final game of the season, was could Chelsea go unbeaten and do an invincible season? And they actually did that. They won again late on. Aggie Beaver-Jones scoring at Stamford Bridge to beat Liverpool 1-0. And they're the first team in the WSL to go unbeaten in a 22-game league season. So, I mean, firstly, what did you make of that? I mean, it's incredible to achieve that, to not be beaten in a season.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I was very fortunate to do it with Arsenal, and I know that across a whole season to maintain those levels of consistency, and it's not always the prettiest of performances in games, but it's about having that mental resilience to find a way to win. They have done that, and they've shown that in abundance across the season. And it's amazing as well when you think of Aggie Beaver-Jones, I think, in terms of her impact on this team and the goal contribution she's had at such a young age still is really impressive. So, yeah, I mean, congratulations to Chelsea and what an impressive season they've had. The highest points tally they've ever had as well at 60 points. Is exceptional.
Yeah, you mentioned the 60 points there. I mean, their record, they won 19 games. They drew 3 games. And as you mentioned, it was the earliest league decider since 2018-2019 season. So it's been a while, and most of the games, have gone down to the final game of the season to decide that title winner. But they ended up winning it by a margin of 12 points. Looking at that 12 points gap, I mean, since 2018-19 season, how have Chelsea managed to do one better and, make that gap even bigger between themselves and the chasing pack? And what can teams around them do to close that gap? And do you think there are teams? Because, I mean, if I look at Arsenal's form under Slagers, I feel like they've closed that gap. But obviously it was too late in terms of, the kind of momentum Chelsea had started to get within the league. What is it that, one, Chelsea have done, and two, what teams need to do maybe to close that? Because that's a massive points gap.
I think what Chelsea have done is they've had an unbelievable foundation to build upon, obviously with the squad that Emma Hayes built and what Sonia has added to this squad. But it starts with the culture and the standards, I think, in the club, in the background, at the training ground, from all of those players, that none of them, I think, rest, whether they're starting players or impact players. They're players that all come in and actually make the team better or help them get over the line and get those results. I think what helps is getting off to a good start in the season. You can't leave it too late. It's a 12 team league. There's not an abundance of games that allow you to find the sort of moments across the season to try and bridge those gaps. It's quite challenging because every single game matters. So that's what they've done exceptionally well. They got off to a flying start and they had that early momentum. Arsenal, before Renee Slegers came in charge, I think back in October, they'd only scored, they only won 1 in 4 in that time under Jonas, and that's a big gap to bridge when you start the season. So I think that's what Chelsea have done, and they've just become this powerhouse of knowing how to compete on all fronts as well.
Absolutely. And do you think there was ever a point in the season, I'm trying to think back, was there a point in the season where I thought actually Chelsea might win the league? Did you ever think that at any point, or did you just think because of the way they started, they were just going to dominate the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think there was only a point where I think Arsenal were just 3 points or behind at one point a few weeks back, where I thought, this is going to get a bit tasty. But again, I don't think any Chelsea player, including Sonia, had any doubt that they would, complete this season unbeaten. And like I said, you just cannot leave it that late. And ultimately, I think the rotations that Chelsea have been able to deploy throughout the season has been really important, because that squad depth, when you're fighting on all fronts, is massive, especially with some of the injuries that they've had that we forget.
Well, Sam Kerr's been out the whole season, hasn't she? She's the kind of will be a new signing for them next season. A whole season without your top goal scorer from the previous season is crazy. But actually, Sonia Van Pastor, I read, she's actually joined 3 other Chelsea managers, but on the men's side, to become the first Chelsea manager to win a title, the league title, in her first season. So that was impressive. Again, the first female to win a Champions League. And now she comes to Chelsea and joins the likes of, I think it's Mourinho, Conte, and I can't remember the other one. But yeah, she's amongst those 4. So unbelievable. But Neat, what is it about Van Pastor? We talk about the team she inherited. She's obviously inherited a very good Chelsea team, a team that's used to winning, had won 5 back-to-back titles prior to her joining the club. But what has she done different? I remember speaking to Lucy and Lauren James really early on in the season, and they spoke about pre-season and how intense the training was, and tactically how detailed she was with all of that. But what has she actually done different to Emma Hayes to make this team be as successful? Because not only have they won the league, they've won the League Cup, and they're in a cup final at the weekend.
I think Sonia Van Pastor has got them, when she became in charge, she got them running a lot more. And and I think sometimes even traditional running in training, any player can tell you, is not the most enjoyable. But what it does is build mental resilience. And I think she's added some of that as well. Some might see that as old school, but it's part of football. Getting those fitness levels to the highest possible level you can is really important now when it's so competitive and the margins are so fine. I think the other thing that she's added to this team is she's a big personality that's come in with lots of charisma, but she also has a firm hand, if you like, on the team, and she's able to be direct, I think, and give clarity. She's very self-reflective, which I like. She's been very honest about the performances across the season when they've performed well or underperformed. She doesn't shirk away from that. She doesn't, she confronts that. And I think the other side of her is that I think she has a lot of humility, like, and understanding, probably as well, because she's played in really, big teams with lots of pressure and expectation. I think she's managed that side of the game really well. And one of the things she did with this Chelsea side is bring in sort of a psychology expert, if you like, specifically on dynamics and team cohesion. And I think that is a massive, when you've got a team obviously with all that quality, you don't know the league as well yet. You're still trying to build those relationships with your players to understand that actually building those relationships and bonds on and off the pitch is going to help you get to the quality part of your football. Shows a lot of kind of, not just intellect, but just the kind of holistic framework that she wants to operate within.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Nate. I mean, one thing I've really liked about her is her honesty. I think that she is very self-reflective. I think, she fronts up. She is there for the highs and the lows, and will speak honestly about areas that they could have been better, or they were good, or they weren't good, but they got the result. And I really like that. But I mean, we've had conversations off air with her, and I've been really impressed by some of the stuff that she said. And we'll talk some of the stats, because you mentioned there about fitness, etc. And some of these stats will probably highlight why they are first in so many different areas. But yeah, she has been key. And if you think about it, we all talk about that Chelsea team that won last season, and to then come in and better say Emma Hayes. She's already won two trophies now, so already it's been a better season for her, and could go one better with the treble. And we know for Chelsea fans, and we know for WSL fans and women's football fans within the UK, it was a priority for Chelsea to get to a Champions League final and potentially try and win it. They haven't been able to do that. So again, having spoken to her, she knows, and outside, there is room for improvement, and I'm sure she'll go away, and she credits her team. And one thing I think you got to credit Sonia Van Pastor and her team and the work that they've done in terms of a new league. And she said to us, didn't she? She'd heard for many years that it was the best league in Europe, and having experienced it this year, she confirms that. She's like, it's competitive. And what we've got to remember is that Chelsea have been league champions for now 6 years. The league is more difficult from them than any other team in that league. Everybody that plays Chelsea wants to beat Chelsea, or just don't want to lose, right? So it's difficult. They don't want Chelsea to win, so therefore they're going to make it as difficult for Chelsea. So they've obviously got to have managed that as well. But the players have to have credit. I think we haven't because Chelsea got knocked out of the Champions League.
Yeah.
We haven't credited the players enough, I don't believe, because to transition from an era, a generation of an Emma Hayes squad and kind of what she built, to take on board new information, buy into new maybe style, buy into maybe a new training regime, because we talk about the intensity was different, more fitness, stuff that they haven't experienced in a few years. It's credit to the players to buy into that, because we know as players, you go one way or the other. And actually these players are gone, we like what you're saying. They liked her from day one. They've bought into it. And they're, one game, 90 minutes away, or maybe 120 minutes away from actually doing the treble in her first season. So I think as a club collectively, yes, we would have liked them to be in a final, Arsenal-Chelsea final and Champions League would have been amazing. But I think in terms of that, managing the squad depth, which we know, and it took Emma Hayes a few years to manage that. Players weren't happy that they were sat on the bench. She's come in and been able to manage, an even bigger squad depth with bigger and better quality players than arguably Emma Hayes had back then to try and manage. So, I mean, how impressive is it that being able to manage the squad depth and keeping players happy?
Yeah, I think that in itself is a skill that any manager or coach has to be able to do well. And I think she will recognise, of course, there are challenges within that, but if you can be clear about your vision, the team philosophy, the value that every player in the squad adds to the ambition of the club and the team, then I think you get the most out of players. I think when you create a competitive environment where players feel that they are learning, they're developing, they can compete and on all fronts, then you get the best out of them. And these are the top players and some of the best players in the world as well. So they all naturally have that ambition. But I just think it's her personality and the way she even talks about her family and her kids and, just making us realize that there is, we all love football, but we're just people as well. And we have lives and we have family and we have stuff to deal with, and we come to work and we pull together. And I think that's really important part of being a manager.
Yeah, I mean, incredible. And we're just, sorry, Nate, just because you mentioned about that fitness and that training and etc. Something that really struck me was the WSL and then the rankings that came with that. And so changes to the starting 11. Chelsea had 70 changes and they were the first, so they had the most. The different goal scorers, 15 different goal scorers, they were first for that. Goal contributions by subs, 14, they were first for that. Set piece goals, 11, they were first for that. Points won in the last 15 minutes, 9, so they were first for that. Games won by a 1-goal margin, 10, they were first for that. And then least goals conceded, they conceded, I think it was 12 on here, and they were first for that. So when you look at those stats, it's no surprise that they've gone on to dominate the WSL. On reflection to that, and I'll tell you what strikes me the most is the games won by 1-goal margin, and also the goals scored in 9 of the last 15 minutes a game. Without that fitness regime that she brought into the club, these 1-goal margins or even those late goals that they needed 3 points in might not have come with that fitness, without that fitness level.
No, I mean, these stats are incredible, really.
Crazy, right?
It's unbelievable markers. And I think when you say about fitness, yes, she probably has made the team fitter. They played a slightly different style at times and in being more transitional. And sometimes you work just as hard in and out of possession. But I think it's a fitness of the mind as well, because it's staying in the game from a mental standpoint when you need to hold on to that 1-0 lead and that, the 90-plus minute, the opposition is now going to pile on pressure and try and get in and around your box, and every single touch you make has to be perfect and you can't make any errors. That is massively important.
Absolutely.
So by being able to cultivate a team as they have always been, with mentality monsters that know that when things aren't even going right or perfect, that they manage games and moments well. That's the difference. That gets you those 1-0 results, being savvy, recognizing how to slow the game down when you need to, speed it up when you need to. The different goal scorers as well.
That's crazy, right?
I mean, having 15 different goal scorers is ridiculous. We talk about in the game in general, the striker's form has dried up. Where's the goals coming from? Well, Chelsea have an abundance of players that have impacts, that can rotate into different positions and add goals and assist goals. And they all come at different points in the season when you need it to happen as well. So just unreal.
Incredible, isn't it? And I mean, as you say, you don't really get those breakdowns till the end of the season, and you don't look at the reasonings as to how they get there. But
No.
incredible stats there. But there was a game at the Emirates, a really important game, because Arsenal were taking on Manchester United, and the importance of the game was to finish second for Champions League spot, because if you was to finish third, you go in at the third round of Champions League, which would have meant you'd have played your first 2 games 4 weeks after the Women's Euro final. And then obviously you would have had to have had no rest really before you come back in to a pre-season to get ready for that. So it was really important for both teams to try and get those 3 points so that they finish in second. And we know that Arsenal won and secured second place by beating Man United 4-3. They finished on 48 points, 4 points ahead of Man United in the end. So what did you make of the game, Neats? Because Arsenal were cruising. You know, yes, it was 1-1 at the half, but 4-1 quite early into the second half. Looked like they were comfortable. Couple of defensive errors. And Man United get 2 goals back into it, and it's 4-3. And so those last 8 minutes plus added on time, which I think was another 6 minutes, you know, Arsenal had to really defend and see the game out.
Yeah, no, it's a brilliant game, obviously, in terms of it being at the Emirates, that they've been exceptional at home this season. Like you say, they were in cruise control, but they needed to get back into their playing rhythm and start a game well off the back of 2 defeats. So I thought they started well. I thought the first goal was really nice from Chloe Kelly, and then Mornham's finish as well. Really nice finish in just inside the box. But I think that's what happens. You know, you're a team on top. You know, you've got the momentum, and you think, oh, we've got this lovely cushion. You know, 3 extra goals, and then you lose a bit of, I don't know if it's concentration, a bit of sloppiness, a bit of thinking perhaps it's just a bit too easy now. So you take your foot off the pedal a little bit, and just allowed Man United to creep in when Man United were fighting to get goals back. Simple as that. And I think for them, you can't do that.
No, absolutely.
You can't do that. I think we talk about the best teams, and when we've both played, you know, when I played the teams, if we were beating a team 3-0, 4-0, whatever, you want to go and beat them 10. And that's the mentality and mindset you've got to have, is that you're not taking your foot off the pedal. You're going like, we are the dominant team. We're playing in front of our fans. We want to give them something to whoop about. And not just that, actually it's a sign of respect.
Yeah. When
you give your highest and your best effort, level, everything. And I don't think it's not like I'm saying they just threw the game away. I just think that they got into a comfortable rhythm, and Man United maybe found some gears in some critical moments where there was lapses of concentration for Arsenal, a bit of sloppiness in their build-up play, and they've capitalised with a bit of quality.
Yeah, and I saw you're right, and I saw a little stat after the game that actually since Renee Slegers took over Arsenal, they've actually scored 4 goals on average in every home game. So that's quite impressive. So although they did that, you're right. I feel like when I look at the game, I was surprised because actually Man United set up with a back 3-5, you know, in and out of possession. So it was a 5-3-2, or however you see it. They had Galton and Mallard up top. Really surprising. Obviously, their top goal scorer, Turland, was on the bench.
Yeah.
And it was a really surprising lineup stroke set up in terms of, you know, they played with a 4. They had, going into that game, before the game kicked off, the best defensive record in a 4-3-3. They'd only conceded 12 in the league up until that point. They'd never lost a game by a 4-goal margin or conceded 4 in one game.
Yeah.
So I was surprised by the whole setup. I felt like Arsenal struggled with that a little bit in the first half. They could find the areas but didn't know how to get there quickly enough to exploit United. I felt like United were a little bit disjointed in that setup and they couldn't get the connections in the first half. And then I felt like the second half, Arsenal come out better intensity, better quality, and exploited those areas they found in the first half, just not early enough. And then Man United looked all over I mean, Dominic Jensen, she was, in that left of a 3, didn't have the best of games defensively. It was quite difficult for her. But it surprised me because the partnership between both Turner and Laetitia has been unbelievable all season. Now they've done that one game. I know I'm going to flip between this game because obviously that made them finish 3rd. So they have to come back into pre-season earlier. One game away from their FA Cup final against Chelsea, and they completely changed their formation. Do you think that will have any impact going into the Cup final at the weekend?
Yes, a little bit, because I think they know they're going up against a ruthless Chelsea. A Chelsea.
Do you think they changed it because Chelsea played a 3-5 or 5-3-2, however you want to say, against Tottenham in the one win, and they also did it in the last game of the season against Liverpool. So do you think they've done it and they might match it up, thinking Chelsea might do it in the cup final?
Yeah, potentially. Absolutely. I think Mark Skinner and his team would have watched their last couple of games and gone, okay, what have they done differently tactically or personnel? How do we adjust? Or do we have to adjust is the question as well. I think this was such a crucial game in terms of the Champions League spot and where they finished. I was surprised that they came out with that formation, because they probably had a short window of time as well to sort of work on it and get every player well versed in what their roles and responsibilities were. Sometimes I think it can be a bit of overthinking, and every coach or manager probably has had that in their career, where you overthink what the opposition does or what they're going to do and how you might need to nullify them. But I don't think they needed to change what they've been doing. I think if they start with their formation and personnel, they've actually had such good rhythm and momentum and the relationships on the pitch throughout the season. One of the biggest challenges for Man United across the season is actually just finishing their chances. Like, they create so many, chances on goal in matches. They just don't convert them. So I don't think it's ever been a case of they aren't creating enough, or they don't know how to attack, or they can't get into the final third. They're doing that part well. It's the final bit. So I think it was a weird time in this part of the season to adjust your formation.
It was so strange. Honestly, looking at it, I was like, what are they doing? I mean, they had the likes of Gabby George on the bench, who, I know they said they had injuries in the right back area, but they had the likes of Bazette that's played there most of the season as well when there's been injuries. Obviously, Dominic Janssen can play as a right back. She's done it before. And you could have just kept Gabby George at left back. Mallard could have started out on the right or centrally, and you could have had Turlan with Galton on the opposite side. The fact you changed the whole system and you put Galton in a more central position as a front two, it just, for me, it just didn't work. And if they play like that against Chelsea with that formation, I do think they'll struggle.
And Turlan is the club top goal scorer. Why she?
It was so.
I don't understand why you wouldn't even. I mean, as a player as well, when you know those players on the pitch, it's in the back of your mind. Like, this player is a threat. This player can cause problems, as we've seen, especially in box situations. And you're coming up against a very good Arsenal side at the moment, but the moments where you can get into the final third, free kicks, corners, you want those types of players on the pitch as well, I think.
Yeah, and especially it allowed Arsenal fullbacks to get high anyway, because they had no one there, and you had the wing-backs of Man United didn't know whether to get close or double up with the wide players of Arsenal. And so, tactically, I thought, for Man United, in my opinion, that's their biggest game, because finishing second in the Champions League would have been key. Was a bit of a strange decision. But I wanted to ask you, Nitz, in terms of René Slagers, do you think if she'd have taken over Arsenal a little bit earlier, there would have been a bigger fight for the league title, WSL? Or do you think that actually her taking over when she did was when it was needed, and that's where they got that kind of whole refreshment, and they're ready to go, raring something fresh in the squad? What do you think? Because a part of me thought, well, if she took over a little bit earlier, they might have put the chase on really early against Chelsea rather than leaving it so late. But a part of me also thinks that they needed to go through what they did in order to get the reaction from the players that they did.
Yeah. I mean, it's that $1 million question, isn't it?
And I'm asking it.
I know, we're looking to the magic ball. I don't know. I think potentially, I think if you're looking at just what has René Slagers done, what is different about this team under her management, you could argue that what René Slagers has done is made a team that already was quite, performing quite well statistically in the early parts of the season in terms of the actual game execution, chances in the final third, all of that stuff, but wasn't kind of cohesive and feeling positive about what they were doing. You could say, well, that's what she offered. So they, the relationship she's built with those players, would she have given them the confidence earlier on in the season to go out there and actually turn some of those performances into results, positive results? I think she's allowed probably a bit more freedom of expression in the final third, in particular in their movement and rotation. So if that had come in perhaps sooner into their season and they felt that they weren't so like potentially restricted or, always, we've all been there as players. You want to do what the manager says, but sometimes what you need to do is instinctive 100%. Or what you use in front of you on the pitch. Her giving that license might have been really effective. But again, it's so hard to say because like you said, sometimes you need to go through some adversity in a season or whatever to suddenly have someone who's fresh voice, bit of energy, a different kind of presence in the changing room and at training to sort of turn the tide a little bit. And she's done that. But yeah, I do think potentially she could have been the difference if that had happened earlier in the season.
Yeah, and I spoke to Kelly Smith at the weekend, and it was interesting to hear from her in terms of, I mean, she's really comfortable working under Renee Slagers, but even her opportunity, her using her experiences, because she was at the club, Kelly, under Jonas, but actually didn't get the time to work with, the front line.
Yeah.
And now she says she has full responsibility of the front line, breakout sessions and whatever. It's no coincidence, England's best ever striker has gone on to, get an Arsenal team scoring goals for fun when that was the one thing they couldn't do under Jonas. So, really interesting the kind of responsibilities that Slagers is quite comfortable giving, her staff. And that is key to a group of working staff or a manager, that you have everybody around you that you trust and give that ownership and, accountability to.
You're spot on, I think, there, Fara, in terms of understanding your assets in your staff group and being able to delegate and trust that they're going to deliver what you need for the team is a massive skill in itself, I think, as a head coach or manager. And if Renee's been able to demonstrate that and showing that trust is allowing them to get the best out of everyone, not just the players on the pitch, is massively important. And to make everyone feel that they're moving, I think, in the same direction, like they're on the same page. All the messages are aligned. It is huge, because I think when, and on the flip side of that, I think having the temerity to understand that is massive. But obviously when you're under pressure as a manager and you're not necessarily getting results, sometimes the opposite effect happens, and then you feel like you've got to control everything and everyone. So it's, having someone who can challenge you a little bit and go, you know what, like, it's cool. Like, you focus on this and I'll focus on that is hugely important.
She's definitely got that right. I was going to ask, what do you think they need to do next year to close that gap between Chelsea and themselves? But I actually think they're close. I do. I feel like, there's maybe winning against Lyon away from home and qualifying for a Champions League final, after 18 years. Anyone in their right mind is kind of half an eye on that final. And there was those 2 games. I think if you take those 2 games out, the gap would have been 6 by the end of the season. So I think they're close. I think, making Chloe Kelly's deal permanent would be a real interesting one. I think she's had big impact in this squad, having joined in January, and maybe a couple of additions, in terms of that depth that we talk about Chelsea having. I actually think they're really close to Chelsea.
I agree. I think they have a really good base now, a really good foundation. You've got a manager in charge who's had a short window of success, which is under, the start they had. Really impressive to get to a final, to be second in the league, qualify. That is huge for the club, and huge for the club in terms of hopefully retaining players, as you mentioned, Chloe Kelly, and maybe recruiting a few more. We've seen a few players leave, Amanda Illerstedt, Lena Hurtig. They'll probably be looking for backups there in those positions, centre back, another forward potentially. And they got some good youngsters. I mean, potentially, I'm not putting it out there, but Michelle Adjumang,
Put it
she's
out
on
there.
loan in Brighton.
Absolutely.
She potentially, could be coming back. Yeah. I'm sure Arsenal fans would be happy to see that. Katie Reid, who's had a few appearances this season as a centre back. Rosa Kafaji. We've been dying to see her play a bit more. Maybe she'll get more minutes next season. So I agree. I think they're not far off.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I'm really looking forward to the window. I know we've got a big Women's Euros coming up in July, but the transfer window for me, I've definitely got a half eye on that. Neat, I'm going to throw you under the bus here. I'm going to give you a real difficult question.
Oh, man.
Feel free to answer as honestly as you like. If Chelsea are to win the FA Cup final next weekend and win the treble this season, are they more successful than if Arsenal are to go and win the Champions League and finish second in the WSL?
Oh, that is a good question.
Yeah, one I want you to answer, please.
Wow. No, Chelsea are more successful.
I would agree.
Chelsea are more successful because they've done it consistently over 22 games of a season, as well as getting a domestic trophy, potentially another one, and they're into Champions League for next season. I think it's more about the consistency of doing that and, having domestic form and still getting trophies alongside that is huge. I think you can have, as we've seen in the men's game as well, really poor domestic form and go in to win major trophies because it's short format competition, right? Relatively few games, and it relies on sort of one-off performances or, one or two legs where you've just got to be exceptional for.
Yeah.
So I think, I'd have to say Chelsea.
Yeah,
that would be disrespectful. And they're invincible. They're unbeaten.
Exactly, and that was my point. I knew I'd get a nice balanced answer off you. I got asked this question the other day, and I was saying similar things in terms of that consistency over the season, invincible season. Yes, they would have loved the Champions League, so it's the one trophy that kind of hangs over them. But I was like, it's a one-off game in Champions League. You didn't have to show that consistency. You just had to show up in those important knockout stages, and which is something that we know Arsenal can do. So I think it come off the back of the men's Premier League. It come off the back of that, I think, with Man United and Tottenham being in the Europa League final. And obviously one of those now will qualify for the Champions League. And the question was, have Spurs, if they win it, have had a more successful season than Arsenal, who would have only qualified for Champions League, whereas Tottenham qualify with a trophy. So I think it come off the back of that. And they were trying to throw me under the bus as a Chelsea fan. So, it was quite funny. But, I thought I'd ask you because I'd get a nice balanced answer. So,
honestly, that was a great question, though.
But let's just round up the WSL table for the season. Chelsea finished top, Arsenal second, Manchester United third, which means Chelsea, Arsenal and Man United qualify for next season's Champions League. Manchester City finished fourth. Brighton and Hove Albion finished fifth, Aston Villa sixth. That was a surprise for me. The way that they did that at the end of the season, jumped from 11th place to sixth. Incredible. Yeah, absolutely.
Really brilliant.
Maybe they were listening to the podcast and the criticism from us. Liverpool finished 7th, Everton 8th, West Ham 9th, Leicester City 10th, Tottenham Hotspur 11th, and Crystal Palace finished in 12th and were therefore relegated. Neats. We're going to pick our team of the season. Just seen yours come up on here. And it's so interesting that we have similar players. In fact, I think there's only one or two differences in our teams. But you can throw yours out first from goalkeeper and then all the way through.
I'm going to run it real quick. Gone for a 4-2-3-1. Goalkeeper, Fallon Tullis-Joyce. Right back, Emily Fox. Centre back, Maya Letitia. Centre back, Natalie Bjorn. Left back, Sandy Baltimore. Centre midfielder, Mariona Caldente. Centre mid, Erin Cuthbert. Right midfielder, Olivia Smith. Centre mid, Shakira Martinez. Left midfield, Caitlin Ford. And striker, Alessia Russo.
Yeah, so I think there's only two differences. And actually, if I'd have gone 4-2-3-1 like that, I would have definitely had Olivia Smith in there. But anyway, I don't think I got the same communication lines as you did. But anyway, I've gone with Tullis-Joyce as well as my goalkeeper. I couldn't decide between Baltimore McCabe. So I've put Baltimore right back, Maya Letitia, Natalie Bjorn and Kate McCabe left back. So that's my back four. Two holding midfielders, I've gone with Hasegawa and Erin Cuthbert. And then my three, I've gone with Shakira Martinez, I've gone with Caldente and Caitlin Ford. And then my striker was Russo. As I said, I would have took Hasegawa out. I would have put her in centre mid with Erin Cuthbert and I would have put Olivia Smith because we're going to go through some young players and all that, and it's going to contradict my starting my 11 of the season, but that's okay because that's what happens on our shows, Neats. So that's our 11s anyway this season. So player of the season, Barclays WSL player of the season was Mariano Caldente, which was voted for by the fans. The Spanish international scored 9 goals, 5 assists in the WSL this season. Neat, I'm going to throw it out there. Who would you have given your player of the season to?
Probably would give it to Caldente. Closely run with Alessia Russo. Yeah. But I think Caldente for the impact that she's had domestically and in season.
Yeah, if I'd have gone off stats, I would have probably gone with Russo. but I'm going away from stats and I'm just going off the eye and what I see on the eye week to week. And so mine would be Caitlin Ford. Young player this season, and this is why it's contradictive to my 11, because it would definitely be Olivia Smith for me.
Olivia Smith, 1000%. This girl is an absolute baller and has the confidence to match as well.
Yeah. Manager of the season, I think Sonia Van Pastor, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely Sonia. I think it's goes without saying what she's done.
Goal of the season?
Ooh.
You know what?
I've had a few debates over this, I'm not going to lie.
There's a few goals that are similar, and I went with Cayman, her volley for Leicester. I mean, what a volley, by the way. I mean, I liked, there was the one in the top, Miedemar, the one that she bent top, but she actually won Barclays goal of the season. Frank Kirby did it just the other day against Arsenal, a similar goal. So I was trying to look for one that's not really been recreated, and Cayman's volley for Leicester. Guys, if you haven't seen it, that's my top pick.
Do you know what? I had a toss-up between, obviously, Miedemar's won it, but do you remember Ritin Kanarid, the backstick one, instinctive one across the goal, volley?
The side,
side
was
one.
it from Millie Bright? I think was it Millie Bright's long ball?
I think so.
Was it that long ball? Yeah,
but
that was good.
That was one of the debates. But I really liked the Jess Park one against Arsenal. And maybe because it was the state of the game and it being Arsenal, where she took it on the swivel and then she just smashed one in. That probably would have been mine.
Okay. Best signing?
Best signing.
Caldente's got to be.
Yeah, I mean, you would.
I think from the start of the season, it'd have to be Caldente, but Shakira Martinez in the January signing was, the goal she scored, I think she finished third or fourth top goal scorer, and she was only signed in January. But if I'm going from the start of the season, you know what? Baltimore's been unbelievable.
Yeah, I know.
I'm like, what a signing.
I wanted to give it to be fair, this one was challenging.
I'm going Baltimore, sorry.
Because Caldente and Shakira, the impact Shakira Martinez has had in a short space of time, unreal. And you could say, arguably, for West Ham, pivotal. But Baltimore has impressed me a lot.
Baltimore's been good.
I'm going to say, best signing. I'm going to say Shakira Martinez because I think for those teams that aren't challenging the top level teams yet, just the impact of having someone turn around this season.
Yeah. Biggest surprises, so a team that's probably overperformed. I'm probably going to go Brighton.
Yeah.
And the style that they did it with, certainly early on in the season. Yeah. I really enjoyed that one. But what about yourself?
No, I think I would go with Brighton as well. I think they definitely have overperformed and they've really challenged or tried to challenge the early half of the season, that top 3-4. They just dropped off a bit, but I think that's the learning from this season. They'll hopefully take into next season. Yeah, definitely.
Underachievers and flops. So who fell short? Mate, there's only one team. It's Tottenham. And I think there has to be question marks around their manager. Has to be. There's managers that have done, not half as bad as what he has this season and were out of a job like that. How he's kept a job. I think they're like 12, 13 games without a win.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. So, not so much the players. I think that, at this point, at first you start to say players have to take responsibility, but at this point, he has to take responsibility and he's flopped them. Yeah,
Tottenham definitely underachievers. I think, obviously, it's almost parallel to the men's team.
Yeah.
The season they're having and the talk of the fact that early half we were like, they got an identity finally. Great. But you got to turn that identity into performances and results, and neither has happened. Tottenham, I think for probably the money they've spent as well on players and the squad they have, you definitely expect them to finish higher than they did this season.
Yeah, definitely. Guys, Women's Championship has been renamed to WSL2. Way! I was always calling it WSL2 anyway, because that's what I felt it should be. So the Women's Championship will become the Women's Super League 2 from the start of 2025-26 season as part of a major rebrand of women's professional football in England. We're not just a league, we're a movement, new logos, clearly identifying the pyramid. The top flight will remain as a Women's Super League, WSL, bringing both divisions under one umbrella. Is a name change just branding, or does it have a real step forward in the growth of the women's game?
So I actually was at the Barclays Women's Super League Professional Game Awards on the weekend.
I saw with your brother, looking good.
Dragged my brother along for his sins, and they obviously revealed the new branding, the logo, the concept, and you see, I'm on two sort of trains of mind or trains of thought on this one because I think I think it's important to bring the brand under one kind of umbrella. I think that's important. You want people to associate a brand, see a logo and go, I know what that is straight away. You know, sometimes they don't even need to know what the acronyms mean. They just know that that's associated to that league. So I think it's important from that point of view. I think the rebranding, arguably, some are saying, is that the priority for the women's game? Branding, logos, and all that stuff, as opposed to all the other stuff around the game. I'm sure the league is probably looking at the other parts of the game. It's not just about this, but from the point of view from broadcasting to other stakeholders and engaging new stakeholders and furthering investment, really important that we start thinking about having our own identity, living in our own kind of lane as women's football and a women's top league. My only criticism might be on the actual, you know, the sort of WSL titling.
Go on.
Well, I just thought, I'm sure they spent quite a bit of money getting a big agency or whatever to look at the brand. And to me, I just felt like it was a bit like
plain boring.
It was a bit like, I'm sure you spent a lot of money on this, but it took that long to come up with that. That was my only criticism. I think there's two sides to the WSL 2 thing, which I think is great because there's that link. But some people argue that fans struggle with change. Football fans are probably the worst when it comes to change.
But it used to be called WSL 2.
No, I know.
And that's I don't understand why it went to Championship for branding, for sponsors and whatever else, to then come back out under one. It's not a huge change for these fans.
You'd think it wouldn't be, but I've had, conversations with people who are like, oh, but I liked the fact that it had Premiership attached to it and Championship attached to it. But again, you can't please everyone. And I think when you even look at the football pyramid, people argue that, like, if you would say, take the men's, for example, and it's like English Premier League, Championship, League 1, League 2, everyone's like, each league sounds like an elite league. If you said to someone who didn't know football, League 1 or the Premiership or the Championship, they're like, they all sound like elite leagues unless you're like obviously engrossed in football. So I understand that from that concept then, having a WSL and a WSL 2, because it's just very clear that this is the top league and this is the league just below it. Like, I think the only final thing I have to say on this is everyone's questioning, well, what about the rest of the pyramid? Right? We're focused on the top 2 leagues, but everyone's like, well, where do we fit in? What's our part in this? Well, as we know, the pyramid is vitally important from the grassroots all the way up. So I think they need to get that messaging right, and they need to get that out as soon as possible, because I think there's some disgruntled fans out there related to that topic. But
I think it's been like that for a while, Neats, isn't it? Like, I think, when you look at the pyramid and how important the pyramid is to the growth of the game and what is to come through, and opportunity at grassroots to get through, the pyramid has never been right in the women's game. It's always been really top heavy, and our focus has really been up there and never kind of been that way, even though that's where the talent comes from. So I would agree. There has to be something that goes out to kind of represent and show that there's interest and show the rest of the pyramid for sure, because these women that are still playing down at from 3 down to, I think it's 7, isn't it? They have to feel that they're a part of something and the growth of the game.
Definitely, 100%. So we both agree that's vitally important. And I think from the other perspective, though, I do want to say, like, we've got to give some credit to Nikki Doucette and the rest of the team, because ultimately we say we want change, we want progress, we want these things. But then when it starts to happen, we still get like super, people being highly critical, not understanding the challenges that probably they face from driving commercial value, from engaging stakeholders. I think everybody in the women's game is there trying to do the right things, trying to get people on board, and they also face some challenges and barriers. So we got to recognize that, and innovation, we've got to be open to it. Like, it's vitally important for the growth of the women's game. Like, we got to be open to innovation and change and testing something and hoping that it is going to go in the right direction. But to me, it looks quite futuristic. It looks quite modern. So
it's certainly ambitious. Some of the Nikki and some of the conversations I had, if it comes to fruition, is another thing. Is quite difficult, as you mentioned. The change, the investors, are they going to buy into something that is completely different, that is separate from the men, which at times you've struggled. It's interesting to see what comes after after this, and this is the branding, and this is the real takeover, because I know Nuco should have taken over last year. They give themselves an extra year. So it'll be interesting how the game moves forward in all areas. But yeah, as you mentioned, you're excited. I think people are a little bit like, what's going to happen, and wait and see. But change, isn't always bad, guys. So let's wait and see what happens. But we have a fan's question, Neats, I think.
We do. This is from Charlotte Lynch Official. Favourite moment of the season?
Oh, favourite moment of the season.
That's a good question. You thinking of one? I think I have a couple.
Go on, if you've got a couple, start sharing them.
I think one would be Man Utd. The game where I can't remember who scored, but they all got the tribute shirt for Ella Toon's dad with his name and number on the back, and they celebrated every goal. I just thought, what a lovely team moment, special moment for her and her family, and to recognise her dad in that way. I think anyone watching that, would have pulled at your heartstrings, and you would have been like, that must have meant the world to her as well. So really incredible moment, I thought, in the season.
And then again, Man Utd, in terms of the the little girl that passed away in the grassroots team, and when they were coming out with the mascots, and Ella Toon, held a shirt with the little girl's name on the back of it. Again, another moment. So yeah, it looks like Man Utd have been doing good things. But yeah, they were more, I guess, off the field or touching moments of the season, weren't they? Real touching moments. Yeah. So yeah,
I think off the field moments. Yeah, I'm sure we'll think of some on the field moments as well. I think the other one was Kasparai when she kissed her trans inclusion wristband, because of course this topic is quite diversive and controversial. But I think for her to show that symbolic advocacy and support for a group of people who aren't necessarily involved in sport, just living their lives, who are facing certain challenges, really powerful and really brave of her to do in the current climate. In terms of on-pitch moments, I think Chelsea turning around the Champions League tie against Man City.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, that first 45 minutes
that was incredible. Huge. That first 45
even
minutes.
Arsenal doing it at Real Madrid, but that was obviously Champions League. But I was trying to think. That was. I mean, those 4 games were just crazy, weren't they?
Just insane.
To even play a team that many times in a season, it was an incredible moment. But yeah, I mean, there'll be loads to think about. But yeah, Neats, that has wrapped up our WSL podcast of the season, right? 2024-25. I've even forgot what year we're in because we've done so many pods this year. But yeah, thank you for joining me on the pod for the year. I think it's been unbelievable. Love your insights. Love our little bit of chemistry that we have. But guys, if you've enjoyed it, make sure you like, subscribe and comment. And again, always send us in whatever topics you want us to talk about. We're more than happy to discuss these topics on our podcast. But that's it from us for this season, and we'll be back in the Euros, where we have special episodes coming out that is powered by Pepsi Max. So make sure you tune into those. I think there'll be 8 episodes over and across the Women's Euros, starting in June with a pre-Euros episode, and then all throughout the Euros. That's it. We're done. Over, out, mic drop. Woo!